Es un gusto contar con la presencia del profesor Max Wyss, que pues es un sismólogo muy connotado, ya tiene una trayectoria realmente amplia. Les voy a hacer una breve semblanza. El profesor Wyss es originario de Suiza, de Zúrich. Obtuvo su diploma en geofísica en el Instituto Federal de Tecnología de Zúrich y posteriormente realizó su maestría y doctorado en Caltech, Pasadena, en 1970. Después de trabajar como científico en el Instituto Scripps de Oceanografía de California y en el Observatorio Lamont Doherty en Palisades, New York, se unió a la CIRES, que es el Instituto de Investigación en Geofísica de la Universidad de Colorado, en Boulder. En 1991 se unió también, ahí trabajó pues varios años, ahí fue donde tuve la fortuna de conocerlo y de trabajar con él. Posteriormente, en 1991, se unió al Instituto Geofísico de la Universidad de Alaska, en Fairbanks, ocupando la prestigiosa cátedra Guadalquivir de Sismología. Durante 1993 a 95 fue el sismólogo del estado de Alaska, y en 2001 aceptó la dirección de la Agencia Mundial de Monitoreo Planetario y Reducción de Riesgos Sísmicos en Ginebra, Suiza. Es ahora profesor emérito de la Universidad de Alaska. Tiene pues más de 200 publicaciones científicas que tratan, entre otros temas, parámetros de origen sísmico, deformación de la corteza, tensores de esfuerzo, presión de poro relacionada con terremotos, patrones de sismicidad, investigación sobre predicción, peligro y riesgo sísmico, estimación de pérdidas por terremotos, sismotectónica, investigación en catálogos históricos y sismicidad relacionada con volcanes. Los premios que recibió incluyen el premio Humboldt al científico senior y varios premios por investigaciones específicas. Durante 15 años se desempeñó como editor de la revista Pure and Applied Geophysics. Fue presidente del Comité Internacional de la Subcomisión de Predicción de Terremotos de la IASPE durante el 87 a 2002. También participó en el Comité de Evaluación Europeo para la Predicción de Terremotos, y a él se le pidió que criticara una afirmación falsa en particular sobre un método de predicción que estaba tomando boga en ese entonces y fue desmentido. Wyss también formó parte de paneles de revisión de proyectos de la NASA, de la National Science Foundation, del Servicio Geológico de Estados Unidos y del Programa de Geotecnologías alemán. Ha sido profesor visitante en diversas universidades, entre las que se incluye la propia UNAM, la Universidad de Tokio, y Universidad de Tohoku, el ETH de Zúrich, el Instituto de Tsukuba, el Centro de Potsdam, la Universidad de Kiel, la Universidad de Karlsruhe, el Observatorio Psicológico de Erlangen, y pues ha trabajado con investigadores de prácticamente todo el mundo. Como miembro de un equipo internacional de revisión, Max evaluó 2 veces el Programa Nacional de Sismología de la India y 2 veces el desempeño de 5 laboratorios de investigación nacional en Grecia. Ha sido también consultor en análisis de peligro y fundó el consorcio GPS de universidades estadounidenses, que hasta la fecha sigue funcionando y fue el pionero en GPS, conocido como NAFCO. Y pues le damos la bienvenida al profesor Wyss. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Ramón, de invitarme de venir a México. Me gusta mucho México, pero el español ha pasado de activo a pasivo. Entonces debe hablar en inglés. Discúlpame, por favor. Okay, so I will explain some of the things that I know about earthquakes. So, what is the cause of earthquakes? Of course, it's a fundamental question. And I learned a lot in Japan about this because I was in Japan. They have a lot of earthquakes, they have an old culture. And if one doesn't have a scientific or logical explanation, one makes up a story. This is the Japanese story. This is okay. This is a giant catfish that is kept in place by a stone through a god, and when the catfish wriggles, then it's an earthquake. Now, this is what I learned in Japan. However, I didn't like that story so much. I liked the Maori story better from New Zealand. In New Zealand, the earth is a mother, and she is pregnant, and she has a baby god in her womb, and when that god turns around, it's an earthquake. Now, the unfortunate thing is, when that god is born, that's the end of the world. So we hope it's just going to be earthquakes. Se non è vero, è troppo, è ben trovato. That's Italian. I'm learning Italian now. Just if it isn't true, it's well invented. So we can enjoy the story. But the progress of science is really something that is, I think, important on this planet. And the progress of science made a big step at the Good Friday earthquake in Portugal. That is a painting of Lisboa, what happened at the time, and people invented it, or invented these angels are flying around, and somehow it was God who made this. And the priest who then developed a lot of, or stirred up the people about this in this direction, was actually convicted and executed by Marquês de Pombal, who built the city again. And the king retreated in a tent for the rest of his life. It was a splendid tent, as I understand, but the real cause of these things was of a question. So the philosopher Voltaire insisted that this is not God that made this earthquake, but it's nature that generated it. And he wrote a book called Gandhi, a novel, about this, where this comes in. But he was just well, philosopher, I don't have so much respect for. Some philosophers, depends. Kant, for instance, not so great. He was also trying to find some reasons other than that God made this. But then the real point came when John Mitchell wrote that this earthquake must have been caused by rock movements, and the shaking is due to propagation of elastic waves. That is the beginning of science in Europe, indeed. 59 or something like that. Okay, so I think that this earthquake was a horrible thing, but we thank it, thanks to it, there was really the beginning of serious science that used logics and evidence for advancing and understanding things. I think I like to think about this because still today, it's strange how superstition still hangs on. It's everywhere. This morning, today, I read this on my computer. It's a Swiss newspaper because I live in Switzerland. Also, I am Swiss originally. And it says in German there, the Maya calendar predicts horrible things for Christmas Eve. What? I mean, this is such a, this stone is such a wonderful document of ancient science. It's science. And then you come with some garbage like this, it's really, let's move on to science. So that's for a little introduction. So may I tell you about the work I have done over the last 20 years? So I am concerned about earthquake victims. So when an earthquake happens that is large in the world anywhere, I get per SMS and by telefonino, my telephone will ring, a message about this earthquake. And so I have to get up if it's night or any time. I have to get to the computer and calculate the losses estimated by due to this earthquake. So QLARM is the name of the computer code that we made once upon a time. So then I calculate the expected losses, and then I send by email the estimated alert to a number of people. What is in this email? So that would be the important part here. So up here, I have the input, the information about the earthquake. Where was it? How big was it? And there's also the time given of the earthquake. Then the summary of the calculation is here. Fatalities, 2,000 to 6,000. Alert level, red. What was that? That was the earthquake in Turkey. Of course, I sent this as a map. And to explain a few things at the map, later on I show some more maps. This is mean damage. The color is proportional to mean damage in every settlement. Every dot is a settlement, and the size of the dot is proportional to the population, in the program at least. And then out of this, we also calculate the number or the population in the different intensity levels for this earthquake, and that we distribute, or I distribute, within 30 minutes after the earthquake on average, on median, so that the extreme cases are not important. This was the only red alert issued for this earthquake, as it was for the last 3 earthquakes that have killed many people. The one also in Morocco and another one in Afghanistan. I always issued a red alert. The USGS always issued an orange alert and later corrected it to red. I'm sorry you have to brag a little bit about myself, but okay, it's important to realize. After sending this message, which you can sign up, it's free, just anybody who gives me email address will get this. And after that, down at the left, I send a message on Twitter. I put in the same in words, and this map, I put it on Twitter and send it out. And that, of course, a little later, I take my time with that. Okay, why do I do this? I have done this now for 20 years without a salary. And I do it and get up in the middle of the night if necessary because of this. Of course, one has to go and help the victims, and the rich countries can go and help, and the rich countries need to know, know when to go and which earthquakes are really serious, and you have to mobilize and you have to do it fast. Because if you come after 3 days, the chances to find somebody under an injured person under the rubbish alive is very, very low. It happens so. So what I get in real time is, unfortunately, a point source. A source, I mean an earthquake. And a point is to me, of course, x latitude, longitude, depth, magnitude. And the uncertainty is 5 kilometers, but that's a little bit generous. It could be very easily, it could be 10 kilometers or even more. In real time, this message comes 10 minutes plus minus after the earthquake. The fastest source is KFZ, the German Center for Geophysics. The USGS is slower than 10 minutes by now. It used to be faster, but I don't know what happened to them. Okay, so then I would really like the real earthquake is a line source. So there's, it's a rupture that goes through the earth, and small magnitude is short, long magnitude is humongous. I don't know if you know about the longest rupture that went in one go to in the known history, and that is 1,000 kilometers. And it was an earthquake in Sumatra, and I was actually sitting up and making an assessment of the fatalities in this case. And then I saw earthquakes that happened up in the Andaman Islands. I don't know whether you know where the Andaman Islands are. They are part of India. And Sumatra is, of course, all the way down here. And I thought, oh, this is a case of the waves having triggered some of the earthquakes somewhere. Amazing, interesting. No, it wasn't the case. It was the end of the rupture, but that was 1,000 kilometers away. And I had never heard of such a long earthquake before. So, okay, the source is really sometimes a long source. And then if I have only a point source information that's true in real time, then I actually make the wrong calculations. Here is an example. That's the Wenchuan earthquake. Two maps compared, same earthquake. Each dot is a settlement. The color is again proportional to the mean damage. And on the left, we see that's what I got in real time, the information, the epicenter, the magnitude, and I calculated that calculation. And I said it's a very serious earthquake because of magnitude 7.9. And I actually calculated roughly the right number of fatalities, but they were in the wrong place. Look at that. After months, we know that the rupture started here and went to the other end up here. And of course, over here, that message would say these people in this area where the red dot is now, they didn't suffer from this earthquake, but in fact they died because of this earthquake. So it would be really important to have in real time the information of the extent of the source, even if it were approximate. It would improve my real time. I call these real time messages because all of this happens in the first less than an hour of an earthquake, 30 minutes on average. So now Carlos Mendoza knows how to calculate extended sources within about an hour. You don't know, okay, maybe two, but that order of magnitude, that would be fantastic to have that information and update the first partially wrong alert and make the correct alert within in order of hours. This would be a very significant advance of seismology on this planet. I'm serious. This would be better than what the USGS does. Far better, in fact. Okay, does the computer code QLARM calculate earthquake fatalities approximately correctly? Mexico. In any country where I do some work with scenario earthquakes, it's obvious if one has a tool like this, one can make scenarios and say, okay, some people have mapped an active fault someplace, and they know the fault is active, the little earthquakes on it, and now we are expecting one of these days a huge big earthquake for 100 kilometers or more rupture, and then we would like to make a scenario and say, okay, what should we expect in such a case? It says very serious or not so serious. So we would like to make scenarios, and before we dare to say something about Mexico, in this earthquake in the future, so many people will be killed, is what I hope to say together with my colleagues. We have to calibrate or verify this. And we've done this just last week. How the Acambay earthquake, 1912. There is a report in the literature that Ramon had showed me, and I think I saw there 656 people killed. Is that report? And the church collapsed and people were in it, so it has to be in the order of magnitude of several hundred people. It has to be a serious earthquake. And then we calculated what we think is the part that ruptured at that time. And then, so the result of the pure model that we made for it was that 290 to 630 people would be killed in that earthquake at that time, calculated back from the population from today that we have calculated for, to go back and reduce the numbers to past. Okay, and that was done with a depth of 15 kilometers. See, please, in all of the things I show you, there are big uncertainties. For instance, in this case, as in every case, we don't quite know at what depth is the strongest energy release for the earthquake. So we took 15 kilometers here. 10 could also be used, and 10 is probably better. 10 kilometers for the energy release, the maximum energy release. And if we can do that again, that was the first calculation. No fiddling, no changing of attenuation functions, nothing, just the standard. And if we take 10 kilometers, the fit becomes even better because it will increase a little bit, not very much, the fatalities, and then 656 will fall right in the middle from the estimates that we will probably make in the end. So I say, check. That would be the verification. The program is not a stupid idiot program. It does make some sense. And we have the verification of it. This is evidence that we can use it in Mexico, and we can approximately go forward and say what happens in the future. And that is the same earthquake, Acambay, if it happened in 2009. That's the population that needs to be updated in my computer, but that would be in 2009. You see that we have used a line source from here to there, because these red dots, these are again settlements with mean damage, the color proportion mean damage. And in this group of settlements, well, we see that there are some settlements down here that are really big. And these are the different communities of Mexico City. And you notice they are green in a field of blue. Green is higher acceleration, more damage than blue, but at the same distance or farther away, and that's because of the lake bed. You know that, of course. So now, if I then check on the ratio of urban to rural fatalities in this earthquake, I find this: 13% of the fatalities are urban. 87% are rural people. And I think that this is the case in most parts of the world. I'll show you a little more about this. And this is very significant because the United Nations committees, they always say, urban, urban, we have to help the urban people, and the urban are growing and so on and so. But in large earthquake, that is almost always true. And it's true here in Mexico City. Yes, it lost, according to this calculation, of people, but most of them are rural people. So the metropolitan area of Mexico City contributes 9% of the fatalities in this earthquake. So don't tell me that, well, people will tell me whether I want to hear it or not, that in Mexico City, the losses per square kilometer are such and such. And okay, I'm not very interested. I'm interested in that result, which is based on fact. Estimates of percent of rural fatalities. I have taken 53 large earthquakes. By large, I mean magnitude 7 plus. They have different lengths. The shortest is like 50 kilometers, the longest is 500 kilometers. And that also, and many earthquakes are from mainland China, from Iran, from all the places that have large earthquakes on land. I'm sorry, I should have underlined. Tsunami fatalities are not included in anything I tell you now about, because I don't know about modeling tsunami fatalities, so I have to stick to shaking fatalities. So out of the 50s or 53 large earthquakes, I've calculated fatalities and looked how many rural, how many city people are involved. And the picture looks like this. What is shown, this is maybe to understand, we have to be clear. Here is percentage of rural fatalities. So, and here is the earthquake number. That is one earthquake, and I just gave you number one. So there are 53 earthquakes. Now, that earthquake here had no city involved. It's all rural. But that's it because of where it happened. It happened in a rural place, and it was very long as a rupture. This earthquake, this is the Kobe earthquake in Japan. It was a short earthquake, 50 kilometers. There was no village. There are only cities, developed area, mega developed, industrial. And so it has only urban fatalities. But when you look at the whole story, it's clear. It's the rural people who get zapped by earthquakes, not so much the urban people. And you know, when you remember that I showed you the Venezuelan earthquake, it had no really big dots, but it had thousands of little dots, and all these little people, villages killed people, and they suffered from it, and it's not that much urban. So if you look plotted another way, this is the percentage rural in this selection of earthquakes that I've made. I have done the same work for one particular country, that's Colombia, and I don't care, I'm showing it. No, some other time. In Colombia, it is almost the same, but more urban people are killed than rural. When I took all the past earthquakes that I know that have happened, large earthquakes in Colombia, and said, what if they happen today? And what would then be the distribution urban to rural? And it's slightly more urban in the case of Colombia. So it's not always like this, but on the world, it's clearly not always like this. These are urban earthquakes, clearly. But on the big pattern, it's more rural fatalities than urban. How about now mapping the built environment for space? We have to know the built environment to calculate fatalities. It's clear. We have to know what kind of buildings we have in a place, and then we in the computer make the shaking of these buildings, and in each settlement we have a palette of buildings, the very weak ones, the medium weak ones, and the strong ones, and how much, what is the percentage each. I don't show you figures of that, we don't have to go to that depth here, but it's clear that we have to have a palette of buildings with their properties. And so one thing I'm particularly interested in is critical facilities. Critical facilities, hospitals and schools is what I care most about. There are others that are critical, power plants and maybe a police station. I'm not so interested in those. I'm interested in hospitals and schools, and the situation is dismal, in my opinion. So this would be an example in Peru. I took, I made up an earthquake of magnitude 7.5, made a point source and the circle, asked the question, where are the schools? And I had two data sets. One is the data set from OpenStreetMap. I show you more about that. OpenStreetMap is, and it's all schools. OpenStreetMap is something that you can participate. In fact, I will ask you to participate, or to ask your students to participate, or your neighbors, somebody. Because in OpenStreetMap, people can go in with their mobile phones and map buildings and say, this is a gym, this is a restaurant, whatever. And then I compared that to schools given by the government in the big list. Peru has a good list, and look, they're all almost, I could say, you know, they're pretty much the same. And it's pretty much a complete set. Great, Peru knows where their schools are. And I think they also know a little bit about the size of the schools or the property. I'm not sure that they know how they're built. That's the situation in the Himalayas. Unbelievable. This is again, this time I took a line source, set magnitude 7.5, like in the other case, and the dots are the schools that I could find anywhere in. Okay, and here is again, you know, that scale is the scale of destruction if an earthquake happened in this place. And there have some special symbol. These are the fire stations, not a critical facility. So now that doesn't look like a lot of schools, right? But we have no government list. So we went back, a colleague from India now, and said, okay, we know how many people are living in this area. With so many people, how many children have you got, approximately? So we can calculate approximately. So many children, how many schools would you probably have to have for these children? And then the answer is, oh, no, wait. Oh yeah, I got it already here. 5 to 10% of the estimated number of schools are mapped. You know, okay, just a pittance. And that is really, oh, okay, very sad. And that should change. And the people, our friends, especially our friend in Berlin, Daniel Schorlemer, tells me every year, yes, we'll have more information on this, but up to now, we don't have a separation of a category of schools or a category of hospitals. And when I went to the United Nations, and also there is, what is the school organization of the United Nations? What is it called again?
UNESCO.
UNESCO, right? If I ask them about schools, could you give me catalogs of schools in different countries? No answer. Get lost. Don't bother me. I have a good salary. I sit in Geneva. My country has sent me here. And okay. There are countries who give, they're like Peru, you see. Okay, and so Morocco gave me their hospital list. Switzerland, where I lived, where I got the money, several million dollars to build this thing, this program, QLAR, they refused to give me the locations, the statistical amt, as it's called. They refused to give me information of hospitals. It is secret, but everybody in Switzerland knows where they are, these hospitals, you know, and the Russians know it, of course. So ridiculous. I asked even the government entity that funded us to do this, to accumulate this, or put together this program, I asked them to ask the statistical amt. No answer, no, secret. Okay. It's ridiculous. Now, but now this is OpenStreetMap, and that is done by volunteers, people like you, like me. I have mapped where I lived last in the United States. It was a little bit out of the way, so I need to map. And so this is now a map of Zurich, where I grew up. I grew up in this house. It has the correct house number on it. The streets are labeled, as you could see. There's actually one street that is not labeled. I think I know what its name is because I grew up there, but I would have to double check. But I could now go in and add that and participate in OpenStreetMap. So every gray shaded thing is a building. So that is what all that kind of thing is what our friends always show us. OpenStreetMap in Europe. OpenStreetMap right here. We are here. This is Unam. Ramon, do you see your house here?
No.
My host's house is not on here. I don't see hardly any houses mapped. So that is disturbing to me. We have to do something. We have to ask Daniel Schorlemer, why are the footprints of houses not here? Because I'm used to where I lived in California last before coming to Switzerland. Now I live in Switzerland. I'm used to see such rectangles, but without numbers or any information on it. The mapping I do is not to make the outline. That's the footprint that they see from space, yes. Right? But I give the street name, this is the number, is it a hairdresser, is it a this or that, or is it a residence, how many floors? And anything that I know, I put in there, and that then goes into open building map, and that's what we need to know for urban. I think we have to ask them what's going on in Mexico. I'm really puzzled. Open building map is now the next step. Instead of street, the name is street buildings. So here the emphasis is then to figure out that is a part of Tokyo. And you see, okay, there's enormous amount. In fact, there is very much amount information on any building, not just the height, how many floors, but also what's in it. Is it a business? Is it a residence? And I'm interested in hospitals and schools, but that they don't give us. Hospitals, unbelievable. Some people who make decisions, they don't live, I wanted to say in the real world, I should say my world. Might not be the real world, but in my world, they do not live because they gave a category of medical facility, which means dentists, pharmacies. Do I need that? I would be calculating stupid things if I used that for telling people where to take their wounded and which collapsed or not. I need hospitals and how big they are and what kind of hospital they are, what services they offer. And we're still waiting for that. But that is coming, and then eventually we'll have much better data set. And the people, our friends in Potsdam, Germany, they work on the question of what is the completeness in particular parts of the world. And they haven't shown me that map actually. And I wonder whether I would agree with them, because my experience is where the earthquakes are, we have no information. Something totally different. Now we go to science. New parameter, earthquake potency. We wrote a paper, and it's this paper down here, where we said earthquake potency is an important parameter. It is the sum of all earthquakes in a country divided by the number of fatal earthquakes responsible for that. So that is the average number of fatalities in a given country if an earthquake is fatal. Well, that's slightly interesting to me, because Greece has a lot of earthquakes. In Europe, one of the most earthquake-active countries. However, tectonically, Greece is chopped up in faults going this way and that way, and grabens and this and everything mixed up. So you have never a single one fault. So when an earthquake happens, kills 100 people, 70 people, 50 people, something of that order. So Greece has a totally different number than some other countries. Of course, just to show you, okay, the biggest earthquakes, these are fatalities larger than 1,000. The red ones, 100,000 or more. And when you look at the map where they're in the continents, where on land you have no tsunamis involved. Excuse me, big tsunamis, of course, in South America, Central America also. And Alaska, you see no earthquake because nobody lives there. But there are huge earthquakes, of course, more than a dozen, maybe 24 magnitude 8 plus that we know of. So okay, slightly interesting to know where are the big earthquakes. And then here would be a table of the 10 first countries plus Mexico. First, in the ranking of the largest number of fatalities. And China is leading this, followed by Turkey. And yellow marks the countries that have lots of earthquakes. Haiti, for instance, is on this list, but it had only 2 earthquakes to put it on that list, recent earthquakes. So such a list may change as a function of time, but nevertheless, it's kind of interesting. Might also be interesting to you what the minimum magnitude of earthquakes are that kill people. There are magnitude 3.4s that actually killed at least 1 person because they were that shallow and right onto somebody's house and the house was badly built. That kind of combination. But generally, you know, there are small numbers here, but okay. That would be the ranking of earthquakes, earthquake fatalities in countries in the world, as long as we know. And the records are very different for different countries, unfortunately. Here is then the ranking in potency. So the rank, you have 3 columns, 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, and Mexico. Potency is this last column, this one and that one. Yellow, again, the countries that have frequent earthquakes. And see, Venezuela that I mentioned before, Ecuador that I mentioned before is very high up here, although it doesn't have as frequent earthquakes as Iran. Frequent fatal earthquakes. And Mexico is kind of lucky on that list. It has a low expectancy. If you have an earthquake in Mexico only, according to the data I have, only 187 people are expected to be killed. However, I just discovered, was working with Ramon, that an earthquake, the earthquake I showed you earlier, the 600 and plus fatalities, is not in the list. It's not known to the world that you have this earthquake. We have to change that and get that earthquake in the list. So anyway, so on this score, Mexico is kind of lucky. Another new parameter is the earthquake load. That would be the number of earthquake fatalities divided by the population in that country. Okay, so that would be the suffering inflicted by an earthquake. If I say, okay, I have an earthquake with so many fatalities, but the country is very large, and I divide the fatalities in this earthquake by the top population of the country, because all of these people are carrying the damage, they have to fix up what is now broken. Okay, so it's the per capita trouble. Yeah, we have a paper on this too. If you were interested in that, we could give you that paper. So in equations, it would look like the definition of earthquake load. The earthquake load of Q is a particular country, is the fatalities in that country, the fatalities divided by the population. Okay, we can understand that. Go back to 1700 and say so many people killed in Portugal, and the population was X, and they divide by X and say, okay, the hit on that country, it was the load that I calculate. Then I can sum it up over time. That would be the sum of all the earthquakes in a particular country, and say, okay, at time 1500, I had a small population, but also a small fatality. I divide by that. It's the load at that time. And today I have more fatalities, but also more people. and then I have the sum of all the possible loads that we know about, and then we make that per year to say, if you say in so many years you have the sum of these loads, then per year that country, according to the data we have, has suffered that load or has suffered that much of earthquakes. And that would be again a table of ranking. And I added two things. The top ranking is a surprise, Ecuador. The Ecuador would be, according to this measure, the country that has suffered most in earthquakes because it has a small population, has 17 million only, but it had serious earthquakes. So other countries with small populations like Lebanon come up in this list, although they have had only a couple of earthquakes. Whereas big countries, India is way down here, it's number 33 on the ranking. Why? In this case, India has had, historically we know, some of the largest earthquakes measured in fatalities that there are no record of how many exactly. So we know 1,500 so-and-so, there were huge earthquakes, probably a million dead. We don't know that because there is no good record. But so I expect that India will come up in this table because in the next decade or the next century, we'll have mega earthquakes with mega losses in India. There's no question. And Mexico is also a pretty big country. And for that reason, it's only rank 32 on the ranking of load. Whereas these small countries, Turkmenistan, also a small country, for that reason, you need only a couple of fatal earthquakes that are significant to come up in that ranking. Okay, now I have this question. Protection of investments are considered more important than life. I mean, that's the fact, and I'll show you why. And I'm saying, what? I can't believe this. This is what I'm talking about. Dams of, I just took a photograph from the internet, this Tuscan Switzerland. This is close to where I live. And also this is a valley where, as a student, I did some geophysical work to figure out the likelihood of landslides into this reservoir before it was built. Anyway, so that's what is one subject. All over the world, there are these dams. And what does one do in these? For countless dams, one has rigorous seismic hazard estimates are required. Everybody has to do it. It's no question. You have to do it. You cannot build it. And these studies cost typically several thousand, 10,000 Ks of dollars. And I think that's good. Yes, these studies should be done. However, what about cities located on top of active faults, like these dams? Here is Terra. How many? 8 million. It sits on 2 active faults. There's one on each side of the city. And then another example. Haribar, population 2 million, and at religious festivals there are 2 more million guests. And where does it sit? On the Himalayan megathrust that will produce magnitude 8 to 9 earthquakes in the future. No question. And for these places, there's no requirement for hazard and risk assessment. I think this is really unacceptable to me. Money, like the dams, is at stake, and then you make an assessment, and if life starts it, you don't make it, I disagree. Earthquake prediction, just as a last note, because maybe many of you have this word earthquake prediction, you've heard about that. What's the situation on this? So the earthquake generating process, in my opinion, is so complex that we do not have enough information on this process. So in general, prediction does not work. And I discovered this in 20 years as chairman of the International Earthquake Prediction Committee, and we made many, we analyzed many studies that said we're predicting earthquakes, and we have found only 3 maybes. And many, no, this is not solid enough. So, but it's still, might be a possibility that for some earthquakes, one can predict them. Now, in case somebody might makes a prediction, these are the parameters required. And that's in writing and by big, heavy seismologists who in the past have been known as the biggest persons in this field. And they have said latitude, what the definition of a prediction? Give latitude, longitude, depth, magnitude, and possibly the probability, sort of. Now, today, I think this is outdated. The key information is missing. Estimate of the losses, fatalities. We need an updated definition of prediction. I think it's not a prediction to me if you don't include the information of how many people are you expecting to be dead. So with that, I thank you for your muchas gracias.
Un tiempo para las preguntas. ¿Alguien quiere preguntar? Carlos?
Yeah. Thanks, Max. Yeah, I have a couple questions. First of all, with the USGS pager information that comes out, what's different about what you do and what the USGS does, both in terms of mechanically and also the timing?
Okay, it's a good question. And I have asked the leader of that group, David Wall, for collaboration. He has refused in the most rude way you can possibly imagine. So I can't talk to this man, but I can talk to some other people in that group. And so there's a positive thing that they do is they do worldwide soil condition in an approximate way. Namely, VS, velocity of S waves, 30 of the top layers. There's a map of the world that they have implemented for every settlement to estimate is there an amplification or not. That's a good thing. They do this. We don't do it yet. We are implementing it this year. Now, what else are they doing? I don't know. And they don't tell me. And so I work on my own. And I just noticed that for the last 3 catastrophes, I calculated correctly and they didn't.
What about the timing on?
Well, the time is like this. There are 2 time questions. One is how fast come the epicenters magnitude. GFZ by far the first, 6 minutes on medium. USGS sends that information used to be faster, lately only at 10 minutes. Oftentimes I make my estimate of fatalities before the USGS even sends coordinates. That's a USGS. But the pager, on average, 25 minutes delay on median. After an earthquake, the pager comes. My message goes 30 minutes. So I'm 5 minutes later on pager, but pagers are often automatic. And I get out of bed and do this thing. Okay. But these are good questions. And I wish I knew more what I could talk with some people of David Wall's, but they also have been instructed not to talk to me. But
Thank you. This was very interesting.
Do you have some responses from some governments because you showed the prediction of the losses? Any government have made some anything to make some prevention about the risk? Because this is important.
About the response of governments, the best I can tell you was that once upon a time I was brought into the office of I think it was the Home Secretary of India. India is a big country. The Home Secretary is a big man. By Vinod Kaur, a friend of ours, maybe you know him too, Size Morrison, very outstanding gentleman and knowledgeable person. And also high up in the hierarchy in the government. So he brought us, Shri Singh was there. And to this high government official, and he was very interested in everything. He showed us the computer and he had some information about the earthquake and so. But in the end, after his personal interest sort of was in the background, the bottom line was, look, I'm here for 5 years. In these 5 years, nothing bad will happen. And we have other problems, hunger, education, sickness. And you're interesting. And I had a nice conversation, but goodbye. In Gujarat, in the state of Gujarat, where I had a magnitude 8 earthquake with tens of thousands dead, the government wouldn't see us and sent an aide to us saying angrily, what the hell are you wasting our time for coming to talk about earthquakes? That's the governor of Gujarat. So I think this spectrum exists, and it's most governments aren't interested.
You mentioned the differences between urban and rural places. So I was wondering, where is the line or the diffuse line between urban and
of course. Yeah, it's a good question. And we asked ourselves where should we put it. So we tried a few different cutoffs. Here in Mexico, yesterday or last week, when I made the calculation, I took 10,000. So less than that, rural, more than that, urban. But it turns out it doesn't matter so much. You can go to 20,000 or 7,000, and it's always about the same.
but it must also play a role if they are 10,000 in 10 square kilometers. Like let's say, talking about Gaza, for instance, where you have 50 square kilometers and 2 million people, or well, Kurikia. When we came here about almost 30 years ago, there were 1,000 houses in Kurikia.
Yeah.
Probably that was clearly rural under any kind of argument.
Right.
And today there are probably several 10,000 houses.
I'm also very impressed with the development of first time I was visiting professor at UNAM in 1971. I was a guest of Sinalomids. Oh, by the way, no, that's a different story. So the development in Mexico is fantastic. I'm really impressed. I never thought it was that strong, and you're completely right. We have to update our data sets, but the basic thing is still, so now, Curitiba and Querétaro, that is classic, it's a big city. Okay, that's urban, and it used to be rural, but so we have to update these things. And, I should tell you another example. In Greece, there are small settlements. It would be a really small dot by the sea, right next to each other. And in Greece, they know quality of buildings in great detail, amazing, very, very accurate. So now it turns out, in this one village, it's a fishing village, the buildings are mega crummy. And when they make a model for an earthquake, we get a lot of dead people here. The other village is a village with villas from people from the city who go to the seaside for vacation, etc., built with swimming pools and with excellent engineering, and nobody dies when they have an earthquake. And this means that they have the same size. Why am I emphasizing that so much? Because we basically make a model of the whole world where we divide for calculation in villages, towns, and cities, only 3 classes, and give them all the same distribution of buildings. And so the villages, of course, are the worst, and the cities have engineered structures, among others. And so the size is the key for us in most of the world. In Greece, it would be incorrect because of what I just told you. And besides, an open building map would be the answer to your question, that we would know in every settlement what kind of building is this? You know, how high, how was it built, and who is in it, or what business is in it.
You know, after talking to Max, and I think you will agree with me, that one thing we need to consider, not only talking about earthquakes, but in many aspects, is the rural population. Most of our work that is neglected, basically. And sometimes we are facing with all these hazards and things, and we are dealing with lots of things. And it's true that in urban societies and urban environments, we have a lot of hazards and a lot of things that we have to consider. But I'm thinking that things like subsidence or floods or whatever you want to talk about can also be applied in the knowledge that we have in rural areas, and try to come up with some estimate of the damage that our rural areas are going to face. Entonces, los invito a todos los que escuchamos al profesor Wyss, va a estar todavía aquí un par de semanas con nosotros, pues que se acerquen. Él es una persona muy amable, muy agradable de platicar con él, espero que de acuerdo conmigo. Y se acerquen con él y le pregunten, y platiquen con él, porque es una oportunidad única tenerlo aquí con nosotros.
¿Dónde está?
El 209. So we want to thank you, Max, for the talk.
I have to thank you for your hospitality. This is absolutely spectacular. It makes me actually ashamed of my own lack of generosity when you visit.
No.
Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you.